Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to this Monday's Wealth Creation Show. Jim, you're joining us for the sun.
Oh, well, it's cold. It's
It's cold.
I'm just I'm out running, jogging, walking. I'm up to I think 10 miles just now, but that'll do me. My calves are starting to get sore, my glutes as well. Yeah, 10 miles is probably my limit. The now.
How long's that took you then? How long have you been doing that this morning?
Oh, it's about 2.5 hours. I've been on and off. I've had injury, so I've not been running for quite a long time actually. So hence the reason why I'm just testing myself out. But 10 miles seems to be my limit now.
It's a lot better than probably what I could do. Anyway,
this comes back to then what I was going to say. Then the thing about that is, you never know how far you can go until you test your limits.
Push yourself, yeah.
Yeah, it's well, I'm not really pushing myself as such. I'm just testing. So what I'm doing is I'm finding a point in the a wee bit in the distance and thinking, okay, I'll just jog or run to that, and then I'll walk from then on, and then I'll get another point and I'll jog or run to that, and I'll walk from then on. So I'm kind of doing intervals, interval training just to get myself used to it. But that's all part of getting back on the horse, I suppose, getting back in the saddle when it comes to running. I've mastered swimming. I mean, swimming's straightforward. I do that every week, a mile. And then the mountain bike's okay. The road bike, I've not been on a road bike in a while. So it's going to be interesting, especially out in Necker when we're over at the other place, Virgin Gordo, and we're going up that massive hill on a mountain bike, and I'm kind of thinking I'm going to be in the bus. But hey ho, I'm going to do it. I'm not going to go. Oh, I'm not going to do it just in case I fail. It's like no, I need to test myself, and I vowed that I was going to beat Richard. I'm probably not going to beat Richard, to be honest. If I keep up with him, that'll be a good thing. But apart from that, we are where we are, I suppose.
Yeah, it's quite good how you say that you talk about the interval training, and I suppose you could apply that to anything. Do you know, if you've been out the saddle or you're trying to achieve something, setting those benchmarks and then getting to these benchmarks,
absolutely,
and then setting the next one and keeping yourself driving forward in that way. I mean, you could apply that to any aspect of your life.
This is a classic about expectations, isn't it? It's about what you expect, and you get upset with yourself if you can't do what you're expecting. And a lot of people just give up because of that. Oh, I'm no good at it, so and that's it. It's like, okay, but you were good at it at some point in time, so why can you do that again? Or other people have started from scratch, so why can they do that again? I mean, we all started at the same beginnings, didn't we? Djokovic and Andy Murray and all these people, when they started playing tennis, they never just popped out and was a world-class tennis player.
Need to work it.
They started from the very beginning, and they paid the price. I was thinking about this morning because this gives me time to reflect when I'm walking around and when I'm jogging and running. And I was thinking about the eat the rich mentality the current government have got, and the budget is coming up, and it's going to go. Oh, it's going to be difficult. We're going to put capital gains up. We're going to hit property investors. We're going to hit these people, and a lot of property investors are worried, extremely worried. It's going to be 39%, capital gains. And it's like, well, it's only you're not going to be worried if you sell. That's one of the things. So if you're not selling, why are you bothered? And all the draconian, and some people are actually just exiting the market now. They've given up.
Yeah,
it's like we've not even got to the. We don't even know what's going to go on yet. They've given up already. Fine with me.
Like that's just
So that's a classic example, I would say, of just hold in there, just steady the ship, stay the course, just keep moving forward and just keep improving every single day, and you ultimately you'll never get to the destination you really want, because you always set another destination with the destination you've got. Yourself, it's like, I was like, oh, I'm going to retire next year, and it's like, right, let's start Dundee Properties.
I know.
When even Ben ran downstairs. My son ran downstairs and went, wait a minute, I thought you were retiring next year. It's like, no, didn't be daft. It's like I was retiring being an estate agent, but I'll be a multiple business owner. That'll suit me.
Yeah, and like you say, because it takes a different route and down a different path, and that's like a lot of things. You know, you'll start off with one objective, and you'll probably get there, but you'll continue and branch off to something else, and you know, so
Yeah.
yeah. But yeah, and today's topic, I thought we would talk about wealth preservation. So what do I mean when I talk about wealth preservation? Well, it's quite an essential and often probably overlooked part of the whole wealth creation journey. So you've got your wealth creation part where you generate this wealth, and then maybe in your head and part of your plan is for you to then transfer that wealth over to your family or whatever and keep that going. But you need to think about that bit in between where you're preserving it and making sure it's safe and able to be passed along correctly, and actually will be there for you to be able to pass along when the time comes. So yeah,
Mm.
wealth preservation, because wealth creation, that basically focuses on, you know, this high yield, long term investment strategies, you know, generating cash flow and things as well. Whereas wealth preservation is where you're protecting your investments so they can be, you know, passively managed as such, and then maybe appropriately withdrawn, or do you know what, and ultimately protected from inflation as well. And the last couple of years have taught us that quite well, where inflation changes so much and people just exiting, like you said, exiting the market because they
Yeah.
didn't have their investments and their setup built to withstand that kind of rise in inflation. I mean, you did, Jim, and all your investments are obviously risk adverse as much as you can, and you do all this risk analysis, but a lot of people don't. And do you know, if it's property investment, they're mortgaged up to the hills, and a situation like the last 12 months happens, and they're done. So would you say that's because of the reason that they've not set up themselves to be or prepared themselves for such an instance, say inflation and things and interest rates of the way they've went?
Quite possibly. Just now, what I'm going through is looking at discretionary trusts. Now, I've talked about it quite a bit, and I'm still not convinced discretionary trusts are the right route to go. And also inheritance tax planning, because there's capital gains implications if you transfer a company or shares in a company to your children. But I'm getting told that if you do a discretionary trust, then there isn't. But then every 10 years, the discretionary trust gets taxed on the value of the trust, I think. But also, so the value of the trust itself, I think it's 9% or something like that, the value of the trust. So it's a big hit, but it's obviously because you're trying to avoid deliberately inheritance tax and capital gains tax with transferring it to a trust and keeping the hold of it. And you can't do it another way, because if you die, it's going to all get sold off anyway. So they're going to get the slice anyway, regardless. And then I thought to myself, I better just check and see, if I pop my clogs in the morning, everything will go to Lane anyway, so it doesn't matter. So therefore, inheritance tax wouldn't be a problem, because it would all get transferred to Lane, because it's spouse. If you've got a partner and they're not a spouse, you're wide open to inheritance tax if you're above the threshold, because your partner doesn't get it because you're not married, or you've not got a civil partnership or anything like that. So therefore, that's why you should be in that situation. So everything would transfer to Elaine. But the thing is, with Elaine, it's like if anything happens to Elaine and then she's not got herself set up properly, our inheritance tax bill is going to be 2 million.
That's crazy to think that.
Aye, and I actually looked at the other day about getting insured for 2 million, and it's like £600 a month for 20 years if I want insurance for 20 million. And I'm swithering. The very fact that 2 million, sorry, the very fact that I would be covered for some sort of thing, and I'm thinking to myself, I'm convinced that's what the Rothschilds and the Gettys and all that do. I'm sure they have some sort of insurance policy. So what they do is they take, and then eventually when they pop their clogs, their insurance policy pays out, and therefore it pays a huge amount back into the pot where what they took in the first place, more than likely. And that's how they do it. So they're happy to take that hit of £600-700 a month or whatever that is, the £1,000 a month, because 12 grand a year to them is nothing in the scope of things. So these are the things you've got to be concerned about. And so preserving your wealth, that's what I'm doing. Classic example as well is Elaine. I've got her for 10 years for a £600,000 insurance as well, life insurance, because there's a certain situation where she's got certain mortgages in her name I don't want to get rid of. I would rather just pay them off, because it would cause me a problem if anything happened to her with these ones. They won't transfer to me because they're not in my name, remember. So therefore, I've got £600,000, and eventually, within 10 years, we'll get them transferred anyway, because their natural life will come to an end. It's 2034 or something like that. They come to an end, these mortgages. So, and I'm okay with that. So again, what I'm doing physically there is preserving wealth. So you can create wealth, and a lot of people create wealth, but how do they preserve it? Because they run out and buy things like Lamborghinis and all the rest of it, and it's not exactly preserving it; it's actually spending it. And it's like, if that's what you want to do, and that's what you desperately wanted to do all the time, and you just wanted these sort of things, I would call them, then fill your boots, have a great time. A lot of people just sell off all their assets when they get to a certain age, thinking we better sell them all off now and liquidate them all. And to me, that's like chopping down the tree that bears the fruit, especially if it's property or it's investments that it's making you a really good return. And they actually sell them off thinking they've got to do that. And I'm thinking, well, you don't need to. You could work out a way where you can maybe passively pass that on in a risk adverse way to the next generation. Because that's why they usually sell off. They usually go, yeah, we'll sell it off and we'll have a great time with some of the money, and then the rest will be passed to you. And it's like, well, didn't pass it to them just with cash. That's no good to them, because they'll just have to reinvest it to make a return. So why would you want to have the transactional cost of selling off and buying again? Because then if you sell off, you've got capital gains. If then you buy again, then you've lost the capital gains on it. It doesn't make sense. So work out maybe a prudent way where you can transfer it to your children. Or whoever you're wanting to transfer it to for that reason, and that's why trusts are used for that particular reason. As I said, I'm still looking into it, so you never know. But yeah, preserving wealth's got to be the best thing, and a lot of people just don't take stock of that. They think it's about creating it, but anybody can create. You see the classic example of lottery winners win the lottery. Next minute, it's all gone. 3 years later, what happened to it? Oh well. I thought I'd start my business. I always wanted to start a cake business. It's like, okay, you'll probably fail, by the way, if you do that, if you're waiting for that time, because you could have started your cake business anyway now, regardless, and just got on with it and built it up for there. Because then, if you've got all that money and all that wealth, you'll not be pushed by your circumstances. You'll not really be pulled by your dream, because you've probably got your dream anyway, because you've got all the money you want. At that point in time, you'd just be overwhelmed. And Robbie Williams, classic example, yeah.
You'd be playing at it as opposed to, like you're saying, rather than being pushed or pulled by your dream. You've got all that money already, so you'd just be playing at it, really. So you wouldn't. I don't think you'd be wholeheartedly in the business.
There's no compelling reason to push yourself forward. I keep going back to Robbie Williams as a classic example. Everybody knows that time when he came out from behind that screen and goes, "I'm rich beyond my wildest dreams," and then that was the last you heard them for a long time. And he just went to rack and ruin, didn't he?
And then he let, obviously, the money and the fame and drugs and everything totally took over, and he had a lot of soul searching and stuff he had to do to get him back on track.
It was never prepared to accept that amount of money. That was the problem.
Yeah.
And a lot of people can be out there and sit and say, God, give it to me, I would have it. It'd probably destroy you as well. Because you're not equipped. You're not equipped. You're not equipped. You've nailed it. Just like that.
Yeah. Yeah. So, I mean, with the subject of wealth preservation, I've put down, there were 6 kind of points I was wanting to speak to you in conversation today about, and insurance was one of them. You already kind of covered it there, but I think initially when you think about it, and it's the boring part, and it's building that long-term financial plan and having those, financial goals, and like you said, creating a budget, and regular reviewing that and making adjustments where you need to, and having that financial plan. And it is really the boring part, but it's really the essential part of your whole wealth creation journey, in particular wealth preservation. Because without the foundation to follow, then when you've got unexpected expenses and unforeseen losses, and things that could maybe require you dip them into your long-term investments to cover the short-term needs, then you're not really prepared for that, because you've not set up the proper foundations for you to be able to do that, to keep your investments safe. And that is the boring part about wealth creation, but as you always say, Jim, boring pays well.
If you get it right, it definitely does, I would say.
Yeah. I mean, the long-term goal for anybody, if it's done properly, is made up of all these short-term habits being continually, kind of like repeated, doing it repetitively over a longer period of time. The tortoise and the hare, and the hare obviously gets there first quickly, but the tortoise obviously slower over the longer period of time makes it a lot more worthwhile, and you end up being the one that comes out on top. So having that long-term, boring financial plan set up and following it is definitely the way to get yourself off to the best start, and then enable you to be able to preserve that wealth that you then create, instead of doing it overnight and then being totally overwhelmed. Yeah. And also, I mean, well, let's talk about tax planning and or tax optimization, maybe. Probably a better way for putting it.
Probably one of the most controversial things. I mean, everybody, this is where the majority of people now, the media whipped them up into a frenzy about, how tax avoidance is a criminal offence. It's like, it's not. It's tax evasion. Tax avoidance is just planning.
Yeah,
it's just making sure so you're avoiding paying a huge tax bill, like I was saying about inheritance tax, about capital gains tax, all these different things. All you're doing is planning for the future to make sure you don't get caught out with that. So everybody does it to a degree. You get people out there that say, "Oh, I'm not working any more overtime because I'm having to pay higher rate tax on it. And I'm paying 40% of my income, so why am I bothered?" I've got a landlord that's like, they're a window cleaner, and every time they go out and clean a window, because they're a 40% tax rate payer, they only get 60 pence in the pound cleaning windows, and it's like, why would I bother then?
Yeah, that's like, I mean, locally here we've got Diageo, and they're obviously one of the biggest employers, and I know a lot of people that work at Diageo, and they do a lot of overtime, and they get absolutely, like, they get a lot of tax put on it, and sometimes they think to themselves, is it worthwhile me actually going in and doing that, because I'm going to get so much taken off me in tax.
Here's a controversial one. That's why some people don't come off the dole. Because they'll end up getting taxed. They'll not make as much money in their pocket as they have. So is that morally wrong? Is that avoidance? Is that tax avoidance? It is, isn't it? So it's like people in glass houses really shouldn't throw stones, should they? But there seems to be this mentality just now because it's been driven by the current government and the media backing them up on it about eating the rich, and it's like the rich are the ones that are creating your jobs. The people that you're working for are these people. These are the ones that have created all these jobs and started that company from scratch. That's the person that's paying you. So we'll eat the rich, right? They'll end up being out of business. You'll never have a job. You'll not have another job then, and everybody, and you'll have lost that industry.
Yeah.
Is that what we want? No. What you want to do is just get enough to bring in enough, which is acceptable, and not acceptable by just Joe Bloggs' standard, acceptable in a win-win situation by the government and by the person that's wealthy themselves, because then it doesn't give them any incentive to make any effort at all. That's communism.
Yeah.
That's like everybody's equal, and some are more equal than others. It's like, all right, okay, you can have everything, you can have all my wealth you want, but I want you to pay the price I paid for it.
Yeah.
And you'll not do that, will you? Because I tell you what, I was at the point of maybe just throwing myself off the bridge several times because I was pushing myself that hard. Nobody would want to go through that if you knew what I went through. It's unbelievable, but I just kept pushing and pushing and pushing and pushing and pushing. So yeah, you can have it all, but you just have to pay the price. You might have a bigger price, you might have a less of a price, but it's out there. You just have to work out a way to attract it. That's what it comes down to. It's got nothing to do with education, by the way. Yeah. So anybody out there that says, "Oh, I'm just no formally educated," or I don't know enough, or I'm no smart enough," it's like that's bullshit. You're telling yourself crap, because you've got people like, you've got dyslexics like Richard Branson, Jackie Stewart, the racing driver. They're all billionaire, multimillionaire. They've all created something from nothing, just out and it's never held them back.
No, I think there is a big misconception from I mean, obviously, education's important and it's got its place and things, obviously. But people think that they need to be overly educated with degrees and all the rest of it to be successful in business and
Yeah.
whatever. That's not necessarily true.
Could you imagine? Could you imagine if you were sitting as an employer? Here's one for you. A really good example. Imagine if you were an employer and you were sitting, and Elon Musk came in at the sitting interview in front of you. You'd kick him out the door.
Yeah, if you did that.
He's an idiot. He's just like an idiot, isn't he? He's like a fool, but he's a billionaire. So what does that tell you? It's got nothing to do with education. It's got everything to do with attitude and determination, and putting yourself out there and taking those risks and just moving on and being consistent and persistent in your pursuit of what you're wanting.
Yeah, definitely about who you are and how you apply yourself and how committed you are to achieve something. I think are the most important things. But then back to tax planning and things. I mean, there is a lot of ways that you could minimise your tax liabilities and things, especially when you're building long-term wealth. And I mean, Jim, I know that you utilise obviously your pension and things as well to kind of bring you back into that threshold sometimes if.
Okay, so let me talk about that. So, because there'll be things that you want to talk about, but I'll tell you what I do. I have a pension, and the pension is there for a tax advantage, and that is it in a nutshell. If I get into a higher rate situation, which I want to, but then I could just pay that extra money back into my pension, and therefore it'll bring me back to low rate tax. So it's a huge advantage to do that. It's just about transferring money into me rather than actually keeping it in my company. That's all. The company corporation tax 25%. So you could bleat all you want about the fact that that's no fair because you're getting dividends at 8.75% and you're paying less marginal tax than everybody else. It's like, but I'm still paying 25% on that income through my corporation tax.
Yeah.
So 8.75 plus 25% is something like 34% tax rate. So I'm still paying it regardless. It's just that I've got more in my hand, that's all. And that's the same with every wealthy person, unless they've got non-domicile somewhere else and they're living in a tax-free environment or the transfer. But that's for the super rich. You'll never get these people, by the way. This is the thing about everybody thinks that's who the government's going for. They're not. They're going for Joe Bloggs. They're going for you. Yes, you that's listening to this right now. They're coming for you. They're not going for Elon Musk. They're not going for Richard Branson. They're not going for anybody at that level. They're not going for Bezos or anybody like that. They're coming for you, middle tax earner. That's who they're coming for.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah. I mean, honestly, they think these are the people that actually think it's like, we're going to get these rich people. It's like, no, we're not. We'll never get these rich people. They've left already. John Caldwell was talking about Lon Koonsberg yesterday morning. John Caldwell, the philanthropist, by the way. Koonsberg really said, the billionaire. It's like, and he went, well, wait a minute. That's fine, but I've been a philanthropist for like the last 20 years. And that's what I do. I don't run about and be a billionaire. And she still took an objection to that and called him the billionaire philanthropist and tried. And it's like easy saying how the media portrays people like that. But he actually said it himself. He said, all these people that Joe Bloggs think the government's going to get, they're not, because they've already left the country. And all their stuff's outside of the country. They'll never get these people. And if you change the nom-dom status, which is the thing that the government's going on about now, it's like, we're going to get these people and change the nom-dom, the temporary one. It only allows them to pay 30 grand a year and they get away with it, like Richie Sunak's wife. These people will just leave the country permanently. And then you've lost all their investment. Look at P&O. Here's a classic example recently as well. Another one. This is about wealth preservation, remember, but I'm still making these points about wealth preservation because this is how you attract it into the country. P&O are going to invest £1 billion in Britain. And the Transport Secretary stands up and says, I don't think you should use P&O because they're working practices, and I wouldn't use them. So I think everybody else shouldn't use them either. And yet P&O is going to put £1 billion into Britain.
Into the travel industry.
How stupid could you get as a government, eh? And then everybody else in the government's distanced themselves from the Transport Secretary, and it's like, whoa, that's no our statements and all the rest of it. But that's the mentality of these people. They don't realise, and that's why That's why people, and I would say people like me, then have to work out ways to preserve their wealth. Because everybody wants to pass on something to their next generation, to their children, to help them, don't they? Everybody out there does. No matter how much money you've got, you always want it. My mum used to say that to me, and my dad used to say, well, you'll get this one day anyway. And I'm like, well, by the time I get there and you get there, I'll no need it. So maybe just give me it now.
When you say that about the transport secretary and things, does that not kind of come back for me when you tell that? So their beliefs or their core beliefs, like we spoke about the other week, have obviously led them to make the decision that P&O are no good because of maybe their working standards or practices or whatever. But maybe that's not how the rest of the country feel, and you're just going to exclude us for getting that £1 billion injection into the country. So
I know, it's mental, and it's the anti-Elon Musk thing as well. It's like we're not inviting them to this thing, as you know. It's like, oh my God, are you stupid or something? You know, these people have their wealth. They're no investing in Britain. We need to attract investment in order to grow, and your policy is for growth. Growth. That's what we need. It's inherently, if you're not growing, you're not generating enough income, therefore you're not generating enough taxes to pay into the pot, which keeps the NHS going. Hence the reason why there's a crisis in the NHS with the budget, hence the reason why there's a crisis in education with the budget, hence the reason why there's a crisis in bloody everything with the budget. Because they've not got enough money, and yet we've got a situation where we're in a full employment. So what does that tell you about, you know, wealth? And this is why people need to preserve wealth, because the people that are going to get it are actually, you know, you, Richard, they're coming for you as well. We're not going to increase taxes on the individual people. That's fine. But you'll probably end up working out some other stealth tax, like, for example, fuel duty, for example, spirits, for example, you know, something else, something else that they're going to get taxed off it. They might look at what the smash and grab was done on the tax and dividends for pensions. You know, dividends to pensions ended up getting taxed by George Osborne, and nobody noticed that. You know, and it's like everybody was getting the full amount into their pensions. Then all of a sudden he went, no, we're not going to give you the full amount anymore. We're going to take tax off the dividend that you're getting for your pension first, because we need more money. So it's inevitable. It's just going to get worse and worse and worse in terms of the amount of money that we're needing to run our services.
Yeah,
that's where they have to tackle the problem. The problem that has to be tackled is really at the beginning. It's the people that are actually making all these things and doing all these services and bringing them down to earth and saying, you're a subcontractor, this is what we're paying you, this is what you're doing, or you ain't doing it, we'll just go to someone else.
Yeah. What's you were saying there about obviously inheritance and things, but what's your view on people that maybe are fortunate enough that have possibly money or assets and things that they don't need at the moment, or they don't need them anymore because they've already accumulated enough, about maybe transferring or gifting them at a point while they're still alive to try and avoid or help with that tax kind of standpoint? What's your views on that?
Yeah, that's normally what you would do in proper planning.
Yeah.
But then you've got to then have a real high degree of trust, and you've got to then get to a point where you think, I won't really need it. And this is the problem in human nature. You've got people out there that have, more money than they could shake a stick at, if that's the right expression. But they still think they're going to run out of money if they live too long. Honestly. My mum's like that. It's like you're sitting in a £500,000 house and there's no debt on it, and then you've got whatever it is else you've got, and you're whatever your age you're at, even over the last 20 years, it's like, there's a lot of money there.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, enough.
Even for 20 years, if you liquidated the whole lot and went into rented accommodation.
Mm-hmm.
So I think there's just an inherent nature. It's an inherent human nature, a human trait that I do think we think we're going to run out of money when we actually aren't. If I'll transfer all my wealth to my children over a period of time, I'll probably be left with nothing. I'll move into rented accommodation. The children own the house that I'll move into, and I'll pay them rent, and that's fine. And if they decide one day and say, well, we're not going to give you anything at all, or no help you in at all, it's like, well, it's my own fault, really, isn't it?
But then, like you say, you need to have that trust that who you're passing on to, whether it be your children or whatever, that they're going to take the baton over and follow through with it as you would expect them to a certain degree.
I would say so. John Caldwell's a good example. So is Bill Gates in that. When you think about the transfer of wealth, I mean, John Caldwell's promised to give 70% of his wealth to charity and good causes.
Mhm.
So how could you then castigate someone like that for for saying that you're no paying we want more money out of you to pay taxes and all the rest of it. But he's transferring 70% of his wealth. He's giving away 70% of his wealth back to charities and good causes that need it. And that's exactly where the money is going anyway, when it goes through the government. So why do you just miss out the middleman and just give it direct to them? But nobody wants to see that bit, you see, because that doesn't agree with their rhetoric, does it? Or their story. The story that they tell themselves is completely different from the story it actually is in reality.
Mm-hmm.
He's giving himself a 70% tax by giving it away.
Yeah, you notice in the media and things quite a lot, and it's like the rich, and especially like the super rich and things, they get castigated quite a lot and vilified quite a lot as well.
Super rich account for hardly anybody in the world.
No.
There's hardly anybody, honestly. It's mental. It's like when you look at it, the super rich account for hardly anybody in the world.
Yeah, it's just because it's the media. It's a media-driven thing as well, I think, and that's what gets everybody in that mindset. So, but with regards to tax and things as well, you mentioned a wee bit there when you were talking about how tax changes and things. So, tax rules do change over time, and it is important that if you're creating your own wealth and running your own business and things as well, to keep up to date with how things are changing with tax and all the latest information, and because it's a key part to managing your money correctly. To know or have at least a general knowledge of tax, or have somebody that knows what they're doing with tax, dealing with things for you. So, and then I was going to go on to speak about considering insurance and things, and insurance for that risk management side of things. And you did mention about obviously your own insurance policies and things, and looking at where it could really identify the potential threats with things like your livelihood and your earnings and things, and which are a vital part of your wealth preservation. Do you know things like having obviously a healthy emergency saving fund, and considering insurances and other things that would help you be a wee bit risk adverse, and provide that kind of just in case cushion, so you know that obviously you're not so vulnerable. And I think during like I would say probably where I am in my life, your prime earning years, do you know, it's reliable on you as a person to be bringing in an income. So maybe obviously insurances and things at that point in your life to cover you as a person. Because if something was to happen to you, then you wouldn't have that earning, or you wouldn't have, do you know, if you've got people dependents and things as well, that's where insurance policies would be really important for that period of your life. Would you agree in that aspect, Jim, for somebody
I think to a degree maybe that is assured, but I was always self-insured the way I did things.
Mm-hmm.
I never really it's only now I've started to begin to think about insurance and why I would need it, and playing the downside. I just took the risks. It was calculated risks,
Mm-hmm.
because I knew if I wasn't able to, my ability to perform, in other words, earn out my full-time job, I still knew we could sit back and actually just live on our income that we get from our property. In terms of what we're doing, so I knew if my ability to perform was impinged, then I would be okay. So it was like I was self-insured anyway. I had it. I was covered that way. So that's how I did it. But I could understand. It's interesting that you said the prime earning years for you. It's like I think people's prime earning years is actually from 40 onwards.
Well, I'm about there.
Yeah, I think it's 40 onwards, and I think possibly even for some people, the prime earning years are 50 onwards, because they've got all that knowledge and expertise now, and they can then probably start their own company, or they could move up in terms of where. More than likely start their own company, or they take over another company, and they make it better and greater because of their experience and expertise. There's no doubt about it. You look at the classic examples about Colonel Sanders when he retired and his pension was like $100 a month, and he thought, Christ almighty, I'm never going to be able to survive on that. So then he's trying to sell off his grandmother's chicken recipe, fried chicken recipe, everybody else to license it, and they weren't interested. So he thought, I'll just start myself. And then that's how KFC came about. And then Ray Kroc was like, trying to sell multi-mixers to McDonald's brothers so he could sell more milkshakes. So if he sold them the multi-mixers, because he was a multi-mixer salesman for milkshake makers, if he got them to build their business and franchise their business, then he would be able to sell them more multi-mixers as a result of that. Therefore, he would be more prosperous as a salesman. What he failed to realize is like his business is like in the franchise business, but he didn't know that at the time. It was only after a period of time he then caught on the fact that it's like, wait a minute, I tell you what we'll do. They didn't want to expand. If you watch The Founder, they didn't want to expand. So then what he said, it was like, I tell you what I'll do. I'll expand the franchise business for you if you give him the rights to do it. And then he could sell more multi-mixers, and then he could be more prosperous with the company he's got as a result of that. So that's the sort of thing he wanted to do. And then he bumped into an accountant because he was doing it really badly. And an accountant went, no, you're not in the hamburger business. You're in the real estate business. You should just license it out to them and not run them. You should let them run it, and you should just rent everything to them and rent the system to them. So you get a cut every single time, but you're not actually doing anything for it except the main things for everyone else, like marketing, like developing the taste and the brand. That's what you should be doing as McDonald's, and owning the real estate rather than actually letting them buy the real estate. You buy it and build it and rent it to them. And that's how money's made. Money's made like that. It's never made and I think when you look at the analogy here about passive income versus earned income is the hare, isn't it? Passive income's the toys. The slow burner, brings in just small amounts. But small amounts, it's not really reliant on your ability to perform. So it always comes in regardless and irrespective of what you're doing, whether you're lying on a beach or, sunning yourself up somewhere or climbing a mountain or doing whatever you want to do, sitting in a park, you're still earning money. Whereas if you're sitting earning a job, you stop performing and then you're not paid. That's it. It's different, isn't it? But one makes a lot of money initially, but you have to still keep doing it. One makes small amounts. Look at records. Look at music. Look at books. Look at the amount of royalties that these people get. That's by the way, that's the people you're talking about eating the rich. It's like, let's go for all the musicians. Let's go for all the book writers and the authors. Because they're all making money and how they make it. Let's go. And these are all the people that are industrious, innovative, creative. It's like, all right, okay, so we're going to shoot ourselves in the foot here. We're definitely going to shoot ourselves in the foot if they go on a draconian policy, about eating the rich in the budget in October at the end of the month.
Yeah, it's interesting to see how that goes. But
in terms of wealth preservation, you're right. It is about just making sure you minimise the downside all the time. About looking at taxation, looking at insurance, making sure you're covered. Possibly looking at, for example, BUPA. For people that earn a bit more, going BUPA instead of having to wait at the NHS, because the NHS is notorious for taking years to do anything, and you can get really upset by that. But if somebody is a top performer, why would you not have them under BUPA? Because you want them to get better quicker so they can perform better and more.
Yeah, that makes sense. Definitely.
This about everybody's got to use the NHS. Everybody's got to. It's like, oh my God! It's like, well, if you get these people out of the NHS, the NHS has then got more resources for people that need it, I suppose.
Yeah, it would take that bit of pressure off.
It's not a black or white situation, by the way. So it's not as contrived or as separated as that. But that's just one example about how you could look at it. That's all.
Yeah, it's interesting what you said about, like, when you're talking about Colonel Sanders and things like that. Well, they all had that success. If that was later on in life, that was on the other side of 40, 50. It's not like, as I said, I know I prefer to like it's kind of prime years. But insurance, obviously, at time in life, maybe for yourself, or even later on when you're thinking about, who depends on you, if it's children and things like that as well. If something was to happen, to make sure they were all right, and that's that risk management part of it, and insurance could be a big element of it. Also, to prioritise your estate planning is a really important part if you want to transfer wealth. I know this is something that you've been dealing with in recent years, Jim, because you're thinking about the future and transferring things over. And there's there's a kind of series of legal instruments and things that enable a person to be able to pass their wealth across, especially in the form of assets and things as well. And have you had to go through, do you know, have you had to look at things like power of attorney or living wills and trusts and, do you know, things like this, and to be able to then pass along or pass over wealth at some point?
Well, just now, I've got power of attorney for Elaine and I. Tony can do it, or one of the other can do it. So power of attorney, regardless, irrespective if you're alive or no, because I might be half up a mountain and they might have to go and sign documents and on my behalf, and therefore they can just wave the documents in front of them and they can do it. And also, a kind of basic will. Ideally, I shouldn't really have a basic will. I should have something that's wind and watertight at this point in time. But stupidly, I've still got, the typical basic will that you get from a solicitor saying it all passes to the kids.
Yeah. Yeah. How important are wills, would you say, especially when you've got assets and wealth? Would you say they are really important? I mean, some people don't have any kind of form of will.
Oh, of course they are. Of course they are.
It's a common thing for people not to have wills. And it can cause a lot of problems if somebody was to unexpectedly obviously have something happen to them and them not be here.
A huge problem it could cause if you don't leave a will in place, especially. I mean, there's a default situation with the legislation anyway, I think. But if you don't have a will, therefore it can cause a huge problem within your family, because then it starts with the fighting between everybody. That's typically what happens. I've seen it loads of times.
Yeah.
Seen it loads of times, especially if you're selling houses when you have deceased estates and they've not got a will, and they start fighting with each other, the siblings, and it's like, oh, it's horrendous, absolutely horrendous. And then I show them, the ones that obviously are trying to get something resolved, and the one that's, let's, for want of a better tag, the one that's greedy, it just wants it all, regardless, or doesn't want to agree with anything, or just makes things so difficult. I then have to sit with the other lot and advise them what they need to do in order to get that person basically backed into a corner, so they don't have any other choice than to agree with them, and there's no way out, because the way we've done it, because I've got that knowledge and expertise in how to do that in negotiation.
Yeah, and it's so common to have these fallouts and things when it's children dealing with a deceased estate and things as well. We do.
It'll be interesting to see what happens when eventually my mum goes and the house is left and all the rest of it. It'll be interesting to see what happens with that. With my lot, with the rest of my siblings. None of them will watch this, so it doesn't matter. And even if they do, it'll be still interesting to see how that transpires. Because as far as I'm concerned, just keep it all, no bothered, no want it. But I'd said to my mum, and anyway, just pass it on to the children direct. You'll just give me another problem to deal with if you pass it on to me. So just pass it on to Ben, Scott, and Tony direct. The share that you would have passed on to me. That's it. Yeah, I don't need it now. You're too late.
Yeah, there is also. I mean, obviously, we're talking about once people have passed and things, but there is a lot of wealth transferring strategies that actually could work possibly better if you start transferring money and things while you're alive. So that is always an option to do that, but just make sure you do it right. And again,
watch out for capital gains. Yep, watch out for capital gains. Watch out for trusts, because you still have taxation on trusts every 10 years, and the trust discretionary trust lasts for 150 years. I don't know what happens after 150 years. I think you just renew the trust again. So these are all things that you need to investigate, but definitely capital gains tax, because if you transfer something to your children, maybe like shares in a company, and the company's worth a lot of money, then you started it from scratch, then technically if you're transferring it to your children and just straightforward, then you should be paying capital gains on it, because it's basically you're gifting them to your child, and you can't just do it for zero. There has to be some sort of dispensation. If there's not, then you'll be capital gains on it. So you might have to pay it now. There is rollover relief, by the way. You get rollover relief in capital gains, I think. Whereas if it's a trading company, not property, because remember that's investments, that's not a business. even though you've got 200 properties, that's not classed as a business, by the way. They just class it as investment property, and it's and it's passive income. 200 properties. I find that hard to believe, but that's how they look at it under the tax legislation. So, but if you've got a business, then you can use rollover relief or holdover relief. I think it is. Check with your accountant. Remember, don't just take my word for it. Holdover relief, when you transfer it, they give you dispensation to do that, and then also you then go into a potential exempt transfer over the next 7 years for that the clawback and the value that whatever you've transferred. What I mean by inheritance tax, well, you get 7 years and it tapers. So, for example, you get 350,000 each, no, 325,000 each up to. So you can transfer the both of you. You've got transfer it to your wife, then transfer it to your, because it's zero, by the way, between spouse. There's zero for capital gains and zero for inheritance tax for transfers between spouse. It's all just love, favour, and affection. That's what it's called in the legal terms. So that's free, and then so you transfer a certain amount to your spouse, and then you both transfer to your children. Therefore, you're able to transfer 325,000 each up to in that value, and then that runs for 7 years. And then once, if you're still alive after 7 years, that falls out of that tax bracket, and then you can do another 325,000 transfer for the next 7 years. So that's potentially how it works for the each year. So you just keep doing that until you get rid of everything and transfer it to your children that way, if you want. Yeah. But then the children have the same problem when they get to your age. They then have to transfer these assets to their children. This is why trust is sometimes the best way forward, because at least the people in charge can be in trust of the assets, because some of the children might just be a head the ball. They might be an absolute idiot. It might, they might just throw caution in the wind, and it might be shares in the company that you own, and they might borrow against them, or they might then try to sell them off and then put you in a difficult position. So these are all things you've got to think about. I mean, my dad used to say, well, I'll be dead anyway, so it doesn't matter. But it's important to then realise that you've got a responsibility to make sure it's passed on ethically and morally in the correct way, I suppose, and not just leave it for them to sort out and fight amongst themselves.
Well, that's what brings me really nicely on to the last part. That was what I talked to you about today, and that is teaching financial responsibility to the next generation and how to actually handle things correctly. Because when I was looking and researching this topic, it showed there was a lot of research showed that most people or most wealth that's been accumulated, it could be lost by the second generation, because the inheritors and things don't have the knowledge, as much knowledge as their predecessors, to maintain the value of that asset, or in this instance we'll talk about your property portfolio. And I know that you're teaching Tony and things to manage the monetary side of things and how that all works, so that it's, when it's passed along, you don't have to worry about it all falling apart and maybe losing its value, because you've got somebody that knows what they're doing with it.
Well, as I said before, it's like if I'm not there anymore, does it really matter? It kind of does, because I would like to think that they're responsible enough to look after the asset and not chop down the tree that bears the fruit. So the next generation that they have, if they do have another generation, then benefits from that as well. And what I've created in the very beginning begins to grow. It's a legacy. People want to be remembered. I mean, it's an inherent thing in our nature, possibly to be remembered. But to be honest, unless you've done anything significant, then nobody will remember you at all in 100 years. No make any difference.
People always talk about wanting to leave a legacy and leave some sort of something to be remembered by, but you're going to have to do something quite exponential and quite poignant to be remembered for, like you say, longer than 100 years. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think for me personally, it's just about leaving a legacy and possibly building this the foundations of what I would call a huge trust. It ends up getting passed on in 100 years' time. Everybody looks back and think, Christ Almighty, where did this come from? And then it's just that sort of thing. I mean, I'll be dead anyway, and it won't matter.
I know it's funny. It's funny to try.
But it'd be nice. It'd be nice because you think about it logically. Like, you'll be so proud in 100 years' time of what you've built. It's like you'll not be here.
No, I know.
You'll not even. There'll be no updates. So you're only thinking about what it might be there just now and what your beliefs might be on that and how everybody might react. And you would like to think that, but apart from that, it's like you'll not be here anyway. Somebody else will live in your house. Somebody else will be. You'll obviously be driving your car because your car will be obsolete by then and scrapped. But everything that you had will be the possession of someone else in 100 years' time if it's still going. You'll no longer have it. It'll not be yours. You're literally. This is what I talked about 5 properties. You'll remember that one day when I says I'm just a caretaker. That's all. I'm only the caretaker now. Andrew Trail was the caretaker before. Ron Grieve was the caretaker before that when it first started. And so you, Richard, you'll probably be the next caretaker, alongside other people that are working in the company. Once I go, that's it. Really, you're just a caretaker. You're just the person at that point in time who looks after that wealth for someone else.
Yeah. Unless you plan to stay along as long as you plan to, then you might outlive me.
Yeah, I will live for a long time, and I will all be very, very healthy. See how I've got that mindset and that determination about how this is going to be for me when I'm 100 years old. I will still be running. I will still be doing triathlons. I will still be swimming. I'll still be cycling, and I will still be running businesses more than likely.
I do fully believe that, but I do think, in the interim, we talk about obviously getting to that point in life when maybe possibly we're not here. But I think while you are, it's really important to teach that financial, responsibility and literacy to your children, to the next generation, and people that are going to be part of that wealth transfer plan, especially for your own wealth, and if it's a portfolio and assets and things as well. Because that strong foundation and money management within a person, if you teach that to them, will help preserve your wealth and everything that you've worked for once it's transferred and once you're no longer here, and then even maybe help them and give them the tools to even have it grow even further. So then that is your legacy, and that's something I think to be proud of at the moment. If you're quite confident in the fact that it will continue like that, and you need to have the right people looking after it for you.
Absolutely. I mean, there's another thing I would love to do as well, is have a foundation which actually, looks and still continues to give to local causes in the community, and so that'll happen at some point in time as well, and over the next 50 years, I suppose. If I'm still here, that's what I will be doing.
Yeah, and I think if you act in a certain way and conduct yourself and things to your in front of your children, things they naturally do pick up the way that you are.
Of course they do,
and pick up those habits. And it's just likewise if people are bringing up and raising children and they've got bad habits, if they're drinking and smoking and addictions and things, your children pick them up. Whereas if you are quite business orientated and teach them about financial literacy and responsibility and creating good habits, then that's what they're going to do as well.
Yeah, it's interesting, but I never put any pressure on my children. I call them my children. God, they're one's 30, coming on 31, and they're in their 20s, and it's like I call them my children. So they're no young children; they're adults. They're adults. So I never forced them to do anything they don't want to do. I never expected them to come into the business like I did. I was expected with my father. It was more or less. When I left school, I kind of felt obliged to work with my dad, whereas my mum was like, "You didn't want to work with your dad. Don't go into that. Do something different." But I naturally just fell into that anyway as a result, because I wasn't great at school. I was just I was disruptive at school, I suppose. I never fitted in. I was the black sheep. They're going about black sheep coffee. Everybody thinks they're the black sheep, by the way. That's why they resonate towards that brand, and it's so successful, the Black Sheep Coffee. And that's why, because everybody does think they're the black sheep, but it's probably more popular to be the white sheep now.
Yeah.
Because everybody thinks they're a black sheep now. So let's get a coffee brand called the White Sheep and turn against the black sheep. Anyway, apart from that, no, it's I never expected them to do anything. I never expected them to come into the business. I just let them take their own course and do what they do. So, Scott is in theatre at the buyer. He's sound and light in production, and that's what he wanted to do. That's what floats his boat. Ben's works in computers and networks and that, and he works with R&A. And then Tony works with me partially, but she also works with the post office. She's a postie. She loves it, and yet she's got her degree in accountancy, and she does. But the great thing about that is then she understands the dynamics of my business. She understands what I talk about when I talk about the taxation, about the margins, about the gross margin, the net margin, about the return on investment. She's beginning to understand why and what and why I'm doing certain things and what to do and when. She's understanding commercial reality about what I'm doing as well. So that's what she understands. And as I said before, it's like this then allows them to do whatever they want to do, but they've always got the fallback position that this wealth that I've preserved, because that's what we're doing, is actually going to look after them for the rest of their life, irrespective of what they're doing.
Yeah, definitely. And I think, like you say, you've never kind of pushed that, but because it's a big part of who you are, that's picked up on it, and Tony especially, I know, is involved, and that's all part of your preserving the wealth that you've created. I think to round up, obviously, we've covered quite a lot today, and I think really the ultimate goal we've established of wealth preservation is safeguarding those gains for the future, and obviously you could do that by implementing a number of different strategies that we've covered today, and whether that's obviously looking at insurances and having that knowledge passed along to the right people. But it could really help you build that secure financial future, not only for yourself, but your family members and other beneficiaries, or even, gift receipts that you're talking about, obviously recipients, giving some to charity and things. I mean, who did you say was giving 70% of their wealth away in their will to charities and things?
John Caldwell, he's doing it now. He's just given that away now because he's got Caldwell children and all the rest of it, and he's doing lots of other things. But Bill Gates is doing that. So is Warren Buffett. Warren Buffett's going to give away, I think, 99% of his wealth,
which is a lot.
That's billions. Yeah. He's only keeping 1% to pass on to his kids, but that's it. He's like 99%. Bill Gates is like, I'm giving away most of mine. So it's like they're not bothered. It's like it's the journey. It's the journey. People like that love the journey. They love creating something from nothing. That's what drives them forward. It's not the money. They don't do it for the money. They do it for the love of doing it because they can.
Yeah.
And even when they can't, they do it still to guarantee that they can.
Mm-hmm. Just to kind of reaffirm it with themselves that they can actually.
It's just It's like people become out to people start out to become Olympic athletes, don't they? And that's exactly the same for them in business. They just become Olympic athletes in business. That's why they become billionaires. But the billionaires just a byproduct of them being really successful in business. The millionaires a byproduct of being really successful as well. They're just levels that are measured by money and monetary terms, and that's the reality. So you could say they're the Olympic gold medalists of the business world.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, because I mean, obviously, wealth at that level. I mean, it's the same at any level. If you've got a substantial amount of wealth, whether it's billions or millions, or even if it's just tens of thousands, but the premise of surrounds it all is the same. Obviously, when you're at billionaire status, they're never ever going to use all that money. So to give it all away to other people who do need it at some point in time is probably the right thing to do, as long as you've left enough to live or your family.
Of course it is, but then there's the debate about how much do you need to live, because anybody else sitting in a 2-bedroom flat, with struggling for the heating and struggling for eating says, well, basically I can have everything that you've got then, and everybody else can have everything you've got, and then we can live. And it's like, then they go, well, I'll just give up then and sell my business, and everybody's out of job.
Yeah.
I see it every single time coming up with the thing about private aeroplanes. You see it coming up on social media now. Greenpeace is like, we should stop, we should tax these people to the hilt. And I went, okay, then let's tax them to the hilt. They'll sell the private aeroplane then, because it's no beneficial anymore. There's no return on investment for them, because that's why they invest in it. They didn't invest in it for them to run about the world. It's just on a jolly. They invest in it because it makes sense. Grant Cardone does it because he can travel quicker to anybody he wants. A prime minister can do it because he can travel to another country at the drop of a hat, rather than having to wait on everybody else, which is time is more important to them. And that's why they do private jets, for that reason. But if we get rid of all the private jets then and tax them to hell, they get rid of them all. All these people in the private jet industry are out of a job.
Yeah.
All these people that make these private jet are out of a job. So let's pay all these people off as well then. All these people are running out of a job because of that. All these people in the petrochemical industry, because the aviation fuel industry, are out of a job because they're using less fuel as well now. So let's put all these people out of a job then.
And people just don't think about the bigger picture and the knock-on effect it'll have on everybody that's involved.
Because they think about themselves.
Yeah.
Think about that, Richard. Which one is more ethical? The one that builds a business, employs a lot of people, and looks after them and pays them and the lifestyle that they become accustomed to, or the person that just thinks about themselves and wants to tax everyone else and take what they've got? Which is more ethical?
Yeah, you're absolutely right. But yeah, and I mean, I think to wrap up today, I think for us to see that everybody's individual case is slightly different, as obviously or quite vastly different in some cases, but everybody is different. And whether you're running a business, building a portfolio, or whatever your vehicle is for building your own wealth creation, it's important that you speak to the right people and seek the right advice from, tax advisors, or, if it's having the right solicitor, estate planners, people that will help you really strengthen your wealth preservation plan and help you achieve your financial goals and keep them safe for the duration of your life and of course to your inheritors for their life as well. So yeah, wealth preservation is a key thing, and I think a lot of people think about creating the wealth and potentially passing it on, but don't think about that bit in the middle where you need to find the ways to preserve it correctly. And hopefully we've covered a lot of that today, and a lot of insights from your own personal circumstances, Jim. I hope I've kind of been able to depict that quite clearly to people that have been listening today.
Good.
So we're going to let you get back to your run or your interval.
I'll not be running now. Everything's seized up. I could feel it. My calves are screaming.
Well, thanks for joining us and sharing that with us today, and I'll let you go and loosen up a bit. And thanks everybody for watching. We of course will be back next Monday again at 12:30 for the Wealth Creation Show, and I will catch you then. And until next time, I'll see you later and enjoy the rest of your walk, Jim.
Okay, bye bye for now.
See you later.